Welcome to the Ordinary Doula podcast with Angie Rozier, hosted by Hatched and Latched. Here, we explore the many layers of pregnancy, labor, birth, breastfeeding, and postpartum life through the lens of more than 20 years in a busy doula practice supporting thousands of families. Whether you are preparing for birth, navigating feeding, or adjusting to life with a new baby, this podcast is designed to offer practical knowledge, thoughtful conversation, and empowering support for the real experiences of parenthood.
Hello again, and welcome to the Ordinary Doula podcast. My name is Angie Rozier. I'm your host, and we are sponsored by Hatched and Latched. Go visit hatchedandlatched.com for preparation for childbirth, doula services, lactation services, and postpartum. So today, I want to talk about a topic that kind of in the birth world is a little bit polarizing. And doesn't have to be, but I get it. I totally get it. And I want to talk about epidurals and what about epidurals is intriguing. Why do some people want them, bank on them? Why do some people not want them and want to avoid them? So when I first became a doula over 20 years ago, the epidural conversation was pretty simple. Like you wanted one or you didn't. You were against it or you were for it. But today the conversation is a lot more nuanced, actually. So we know a lot more about labor. We know a lot more about pain and how movement positioning can impact labor. And also the medical community has come a long way, especially in this realm of women's health and giving individualized care. So we're better at looking at the person, the whole person, and giving them the kind of birth that they want. We let the patient have input. That did not used to be the case not that long ago, believe it or not. So we also know that there's no right way or wrong way to give birth, right? And everybody's sitting in a different camp with that. But ultimately, at the end of every single day that a baby's born, we want a healthy mom and a healthy baby. And there are really phenomenally perfect, ideal ways to get there. And then sometimes we need to do something where we step outside of that ideal in order to get our ultimate goal, which is, of course, incredibly important. So this conversation around epidurals has changed a little bit. And I want to talk about making decisions in your pain management strategy. So a lot of people in this world, in the birth world is what I'm talking about. That's the world I live in. Epidurals can be kind of a hot topic. People are for them or against them, like we said, but this is not really like a moral decision, right? Birth culture often creates like team epidural and team unmedicated. And that's not usually as simple as that, because if you're on one of those teams and you're solidly in your corner, but your birth goes a different way, like you have to get an epidural or you couldn't get an epidural, that's conflicting. A lot of conflict going inside of you. So I like to have, a little more fluidity there. Now, I can say that, right, as a birth professional, but as a personal person, I was totally on team unmedicated and never, ever wanted an epidural, never wanted, I never had one, never needed one, which is the miracle of all that, I guess. So I would have been devastated had I had to use that tool, but a lot of people aren't in that camp, and that's great. And some people don't even care, right? And some of us can't wrap our minds around why people don't care about that, but neither one is inherently better than the other. It just depends on what your goals are for your birth. And that's not a right or wrong thing. That's a very personal, individualized thing. Pain management comes in lots of different forms. This is simply one of the forms, one of the tools among dozens of others. So remember this: needing pain medication or pain relief is not a failure. It's normal, right? And that pain relief can come in lots of different ways. Maybe you were hoping it would be the tub. Maybe you were hoping it would be massage and movement. But sometimes an epidural is needed or wanted, even if all those other things are working. So choosing an unmedicated birth isn't necessarily a badge of honor. It's cool. right? I get it. Just like some people are vegan, some people are vegetarian, some people are carnivores. I see a little bit of all of that, and then we can see that and then make our own choices. So this isn't really a badge of honor. It's just a personal choice that hopefully your birth aligns with. So the goal always is a healthy mother, healthy baby, and a woman who feels informed and respected at the end of her birth. So let's talk about what an epidural actually is. It is medication placed into the epidural space. So epi means near or around, right? So just outside of. So it's the dural space. There's the spinal cord, the dural space, dura mater, and then we have the epidural space. So it's just a space. And of course, we know a little needle goes in there. It punctures that and it threads a tiny catheter and then it stays there and it kind of drips narcotics, a little bit of local anesthetic combined with sometimes bupivacaine and fentanyl, and that just kind of numbs the area. It numbs pain while allowing you to still stay awake. Do you know how cool that is? Do you know for how long to take pain away taking all consciousness away? So we have a way now to take some pain away with still helping you be mostly mobile, totally awake and alert, right? So it's kind of cool. It's versatile. It can be adjusted throughout labor as well. So there are differences in epidurals. There's spinals. Spinal goes one layer deeper, one membrane deeper into the spinal space. So that's quicker. That'll be a quicker relief, deeper relief. If a combined spinal epidural is a CSE, a little bit different than an epidural as well. If we're having a planned cesarean, then we might be getting one of those other types of pain relief. The spinal, nothing stays in your back. Actually, it's just a dose is given and it's pulled out. It's a pretty heavy dose and lasts for a couple of hours. So that's pertinent to some situations. Some hospitals use different types of medications than others, and all epidurals are different than they were 20 and 30 years ago. It used to be the goal was like absolute knock them out, right? So no awareness, complete numbness. And that was kind of weird too. And I have had clients, many clients over the years who they regretted getting the epidural because of the weird feeling that is to not feel anything. But the goal now is to be able to feel, right? So that's how epidurals are designed now. They've come a long ways. They've got a little more finesse to them now. And one thing to remember about this too is that timing matters, right? The timing of an epidural. I would say, and I'm pulling all my stats right now again for the last several years, and I'm curious to pull this piece out of it, what the epidural percentage of people that I work with that use epidurals and don't. And for the last 20-ish years, the 20 years that I pulled data, it was about 39% epidural rate. So like a 61% unmedicated rate. My gut says that's changed, where we have a little higher epidural rate now in my practice anyway, with the people that I've worked with over the years. I'm pulling that data right now. And so what I'm sensing is a lot more people are saying, I do want to get an epidural, but not yet. And I'm not for a while. And that's a really healthy space to be in, actually. It leaves you the option of saying, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to keep going. But not being disappointed if you have to get it because you're kind of planning on it. And it helps us understand that, some people think as soon as contractions start, they don't want to feel anything. And that's not the case, right? Contractions warm up. It's kind of slow in the beginning. It doesn't get difficult, generally speaking, until later on. So a lot of people want to just delay that. Some people think they have to wait till 4 or 6 centimeters. That's not the case. That's kind of a myth. Some people get epidurals at 1 centimeter. Some get them at 10. Now hospitals will place an epidural kind of whenever, right? After labor is established, of course, or if the woman requests it. And of course, if an anesthesiologist is available. So we need all those things to kind of be in place. And I have had, of course, clients be very comfortable and fine and say, all right, I'm ready for the epidural. Actually, one just not long ago, she was coping beautifully. There wasn't actually a lot to cope with. Labor was super slow, and I think we were going to either break her water or start Pitocin, something to kind of augment things along. And although she was doing really well, she insisted on having an epidural before that happened. Great, totally fine. Other people would say, let's do that, and then I'll see if I want one. But the timing of things can be pretty flexible, which is awesome. So here's some pros and cons of timing things. When you get an early epidural, like quite early epidural, the benefits are that you get a rest. So it depends on what time of day you're going into labor and how long have you slept and rested going into labor. So you might be less exhausted, right? If we're going to have a long induction, and it's hard to know how long inductions are going to be, but some of them are pretty long. I've been to like 4 births in the last, less than a week. And one of them was a super long, like she went into labor early on a Tuesday morning, like 1 a.m. early, and then had her baby about 4 a.m. on a Friday morning. So we had all of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and part of Friday. That's long, right? So when labor's long like that, you can be totally exhausted. So she did get an epidural at some point, but waited quite a while, which was impressive. Some people, another benefit of earlier epidurals would be people with hypertension. Like if you're having any preeclamptic symptoms sometimes, or severe anxiety. Some people are incredibly anxious about everything, and they are not going to have any kind of a good or positive experience through a labor process. So an epidural could, in a case like that, be a great tool earlier on. Some drawbacks to an early epidural is that it does limit our movement. And so limiting our movement that doesn't do much to help baby rotate and descend. It doesn't stop movement, but it does limit it to some extent. It does require continuous monitoring. So when we get an epidural, we do get a few tethers, I call them. We're getting a blood pressure cuff that's going to be on for quite a while and be used pretty frequently in the beginning. You're going to get a bladder catheter. You're going to get continuous fetal monitoring. You're going to get IV fluids. So you have the epidural catheter, of course, in your back. So it's a little more intervention-y that way. And if we get it early, we've got those interventions for quite a while. Also, some, may cause other interventions, can, cause other risks too, as we have them for a long time. So there's some drawbacks to getting an early epidural. Now let's talk about like later epidurals. When labor is well established, we're really into it. We're into that active or getting to a near transition phase. What I see so commonly is people want to move through labor on their own with their other coping skills until it gets really hard, right? And it's hard to judge before it happens what really hard means. Some people want to do it even if it's really hard, and then they change their mind. Other people want to do it even if it's really hard, and other people want nothing to do with really hard, and all of those are fine. So getting an epidural later, we have the freedom to move. Position changes are great. We could be pretty organic with that. I did a birth a couple days ago with a mom who was totally unmedicated. She moved all over the room. She hated laying down. Like she lay down like a hot second and popped right back up off the bed again because she didn't like it. But she was walking, she was leaning, she was standing, she was on the ball, she was in the tub, she was on the toilet, she was with a step stool. And she was marching around the room. Like movement was really key for her. She ended up not needing an epidural. I think with her previous baby, she did get one. But it is a drawback to getting a later epidural is that it's hard to sit still during those more intense contractions deeper into labor. So some people get an earlier epidural just because they know they can sit still while it's being placed, which is just a short period of time. And honestly, we can work with that, right? Like we can manage for a few minutes, and most anesthesiologists are going to work with you on the timing of that so that they, you can do what you got to do during a contraction and they can do the actual placement between contractions, we hope. Another part about waiting, a drawback about waiting a little bit longer for an epidural is sometimes the anesthesia team might not be available immediately. So I was at a birth, maybe a month ago, and this mom was doing great. Her plan was always to get an epidural. It was her third baby. She was definitely going to get an epidural, but she was doing fine, and she was proud of herself. She was impressed with herself, and she wasn't quite sure when to get it. And she put it off for an hour and put it off for another hour. And finally she says, okay, I'm ready. But the anesthesiologist was not there. It was a smaller hospital. And so as a CRNA who was doing other things in the hospital. So we had to wait about an hour. She hadn't anticipated that. She might have not waited that long if she knew she had to wait a little longer. And then sometimes another drawback is that the baby is emerging or being born before it takes effect. That's kind of a bummer. Not the end of the world. But and I always advise people before you get an epidural to see where labor's at, right? Like, see, are you wanting to get an epidural because you're 9 centimeters, or you want to get an epidural and it turns out you're still 3 centimeters and it becomes a really good decision, easy decision to make. I have had a couple cases where the mom gets an epidural, didn't want to get checked, too intense. She goes, nope, not changing my mind no matter what the check is. So they get an epidural. And then as they're laying down, so after getting an epidural, usually you sit for that, and as they're laying down, here comes the baby. So didn't get a chance to work, but that's okay. So there isn't usually a best time to get an epidural. There's unique times to get epidurals, and that all depends on your labor, your goals, and your particular circumstances, your fatigue levels, the time of day, the support you're getting or not getting, how labor feels to you, the position of the baby. There's a lot of things that go into that. I think what I sense from a lot of my clients is hospital staff will kind of push you into getting an epidural before you're ready, maybe because I'll tell you there's a window of time, or the anesthesiologist is ready right now, and they're trying to save you from some frustration perhaps, but you can wait. You can wait a little if you want to. So let's talk about, a lot of people have this term in their head called a walking epidural. So I actually had a client a couple years ago, and her dad was the anesthesiologist who kind of did the studies around this and coined the phrase walking epidural. And I'd say, it's a lot of people think they can walk with this epidural, and that's not really the case. That just means kind of a lighter dose epidural. So epidurals have gotten a lot lighter than they were, and they can be even lighter. They can be titrated. So you can discuss with your anesthesiologist what your goals are, what you're feeling. If you have the standard dose or regular infusion, or if you want something a little bit lighter than that, and that can be changed throughout labor. So walking it is definitely not getting out of the bed, but still movement is possible, right? So moving in the bed is very encouraged after an epidural is given, even if it's light or not. And leg movement oftentimes remains. A lot of women can still turn over in bed or move their own legs. Some can't, or some can move one leg but not the other. But we still have some pretty good sensation. So some things to use with movement, like after my clients get an epidural, for those who choose to, it's my job to help them move, right? And so I keep an eye on the clock, and I keep an eye on like where the baby's at and how can we rotate and turn this baby. So using peanut balls, that's a really great friend after you get an epidural. Being on your side, using the stirrups. I don't like stirrups for very much, but sometimes putting the stirrup up on one side and putting your leg up on a stirrup can be helpful. Hands and knees. We can still do hands and knees in bed 9 times out of 10. I've helped 400-pound women get on hands and knees with an epidural. And your femurs are pretty strong. They can still kind of support. There was a mom I was with, I'm trying to think, maybe 3 weeks ago. And she had an epidural, and she got on her hands and knees for a long time. She loved it. And it was in what some people might consider a pretty uncomfortable position, but she was there for like an hour and absolutely loved it. And it helped the baby move. It helped cover some pain that she wasn't getting covered with the epidural. The throne position. So you're sitting in the bed, make the bed like a throne. It's like a squatty potty, a toilet with a squatty potty, but you're on the bed. So your feet are kind of higher up than they would be like in a chair. And you can sit straight up. So doing that's a great position for epidurals. You don't want to do it for a long time. You don't want to do any positions for a really long time, right? Because epidural is a gravity-based drug, and what's ever on the downside is going to get a little bit more numb. Flying cowgirl is a great one. Welcher's position is a great one with some assistance with that. So movement should not stop because you have an epidural. So if you're getting an epidural, be more cognizant of your movement and make sure that you're moving pretty frequently, because these position changes still matter, right? Many people think once you get an epidural, you just lay flat. You're like a beached whale, you don't move. No, not true. So some things that you actually have to move more because it's not going to be as organic. So you kind of got to facilitate it. So some positions that are going to be helpful is just understanding you want to rotate something every 30 to 60 minutes or more. You can do open knee chest like my client did not long ago. She loved that position, was there for an hour. So you are on your knees, maybe at peanut balls. You're like sitting on a peanut ball or leaning on a peanut ball. You might be side lying. You might be doing some lunges or runner's pose in the bed. You can do supported hands and knees. You can do the Lavon circuit. I did a lot of that last week with this posterior baby, kind of modified with an epidural, of course. But use gravity whenever possible. There's still lots of opportunities to use gravity after epidurals are used. And these positions and the changes in position increase pelvic diameters in different planes of the pelvis. So we've got the inlet, the middle pelvis, and the outlet. And as you change and move position, you're going to shift all of those at different times depending on where the baby is. That will encourage best fetal rotation. It reduces the risks of C-section. It improves comfort. So there's a lot of perks to moving after epidurals. So a lot of people think that an epidural might lead to a C-section. That's not true. I mean, sometimes it is, like being pregnant leads to a C-section, really, but very rarely is that the one and only factor. The birth I was at last week, gosh, I thought for a really long time we had 0 cervical change after 16 hours, and Pitocin was very, very high and had been on for a long time. And in my mind, and we were doing all the things, all the position changes, all the movement, and I was thinking, gosh, this is going to be a C-section. And she got an epidural at some point. She wanted one. That was kind of her plan, so it worked out. And sometimes a C-section is just going to happen regardless of an epidural or not, if it's needed, right? So that is kind of a myth that epidurals lead to C-sections. Now, if we get an epidural and don't move, that could increase risk of a cesarean, but that's why you want to keep moving. Some people are worried they won't be able to push, and I would say your pushing is less intuitive with an epidural, but we figure it out. It might take a few pushes to get to where you're doing it effectively and efficiently. But sometimes in some cases, pushing can be shorter with an epidural. So if you don't have an epidural, and many people don't, and you push perfectly because you just have to, but pushing might be 1, 2, 3 hours, 4, it could be, just the regular pushing times. But sometimes with an epidural, we might delay the start of pushing because we don't feel that urge to push or that sensation because of the epidural that's in place. So we might shorten the time of pushing because while we're just doing what's called rest and descend or labor down, the body's still contracting. The body doesn't feel like pushing, although it's 10 centimeters, and the baby just comes down a little bit. And then by the time we get to active pushing, we may have much less pushing time. So delayed pushing can sometimes be appropriate in some cases of exhaustion or fatigue. Another myth with epidurals is that I'll be completely numb. I won't be able to feel anything. And epidurals have become a lot lighter than they used to be. And many women still can move their own legs. They can still feel pressure. They're still aware in some fashion of that there's a contraction happening. But the majority of it, of course, is masked by that epidural. And they can still participate pretty actively in their labor. So the team, I also don't like to see the birth team check out when an epidural is given, where people start jumping on their phones, like we're given really awesome present support, and then the epidural is given and the team kind of taps out. That's not cool either. We still need to keep it focused, of course, on the laboring person and help it be a great birth. So some people think after they get an epidural, their birth won't be empowering. And for some people, getting an epidural is empowering, right? Because you've made that decision. It's what you wanted. And when you feel informed, when you feel respected, when your choices are honored, and when you feel support in your choices, your educated decisions, it isn't about the pain that you experience. That's, not what makes for a good birth, but it's how you are empowered through your birth. And to some people, that's not getting an epidural. To others, it absolutely is getting an epidural. So it's how do you know what is right for you? And sometimes you don't until the moment. But I always like people to consider. I did an appointment just today with a couple. It's kind of cool. They're having their 6th baby. So they're having their 6th baby, and this is the first time that they want to go unmedicated. So it was pretty cool to educate them and to watch that, kind of see that happen, which was fun. And so kind of to see lights go on in there and for them. And she's planning for the first time not to, and we gave her a lot of neat tools. So she knows what she's done, and now we're doing something totally different, which is kind of cool as well. So choosing what is right for you. And a lot of times you don't know until you're in the moment. And I've seen this shift and change for people at all different times. For some people, it changes during prenatal education. They take a class, they talk to a friend, they've never really thought much about it. They just thought they'd get an epidural because everybody gets an epidural. And then they really get into where they're in that space in life and they want to learn about it. And they're like, you know what, actually, I don't want one. So I've seen people change their mind through education. Some people change their mind in the moment. It doesn't happen a ton, but I love it when it does. When somebody's planning on getting an epidural, like that's their goal, but during labor, they change their mind. Like, you know what, actually, I'm okay. And they keep going and they keep going and they keep going and they have a baby. That's kind of cool. I've also seen other people really dead set against it, and then something happens in labor, like it's hard, or it's long, or it hits really fast, and they decide to get an epidural. So they changed their goals and their tune at that point. That's okay too. But I love the ones who are like, I'm gonna get an epidural, and they just keep going and they just keep going and they just keep going, and then all of a sudden they're pushing and they have a baby. And I think that's a cool little bonus perk when that does happen. So as you are considering your choices, you do have some, right? You have options, you have choices. And we are living in a time where it's pretty awesome that we have those available to us. So if you're planning an epidural, plan some other things too. Plan a lot of other coping mechanisms leading up to that. Plan position changes after that, and make sure that you still have in mind some just in case stuff. Because one of the bummer things about epidurals is they don't work perfectly. A lot of people are banking on that as their only tool. And when there's a glitch and it doesn't quite work perfectly, or it needs to be replaced, or it's heavier on one side or the other, and you still have to cope with something, you want to have some tools to cope with that. So hopefully today's conversation has helped a little bit about understanding and epidurals and the appropriate use of them. They're incredibly common, of course, in our world, but I'm seeing them so much more be delayed, and then we work with them after that. There's still a lot of movement going on. So depending on which camp you're in or you're not, I totally get it. I've done home births myself. My favorite births, and I think I can speak for a lot of doulas, is just a perfectly awesome, physiologic, empowering, unmedicated birth. Now that's cool to us birth junkies, but I have friends and family who think that's terrible. It's the worst thing ever, and we don't need to do that anymore. It's true, we don't. So decide where you are and what you want to do and what's important to you, because there's lots of neat options out there, and they're available to us so that you have a positive and empowering birth experience, whatever that means for you. So that wraps up our conversation about epidurals and how they have changed a bit over the years, and we use them a little more judiciously and a little bit more we work with them a little bit better, which is great. I wish the very best of luck to you wherever you lie on the epidural spectrum of things. Hopefully you have a great birth, and thanks for being with me here today. Again, this is Angie Rozier signing off from the Ordinary Doula podcast. Visit us over at hatchedandlatched.com and see if we can help you there. We've got some classes for sale, or if there's any services we could help you with, we'd love to do so. And as always, please reach out to someone and make a human connection. We are important to each other and we need each other. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Ordinary Doula podcast with Angie Rozier, hosted by Hatched and Latched. You can find episode credits in the show notes and more information by visiting hatchedandlatched.com. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please leave a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your support helps us continue having thoughtful conversations about birth, breastfeeding, and postpartum life. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue exploring the many experiences, questions, and realities surrounding the journey into parenthood.